I didn't hear the music stop. I didn't feel the glass in my hand go cold. I just stood there at the edge of the garden, watching the two people I had trusted most in the world, and something inside me went very, very quiet. It was my nephew's wedding. A Saturday in late September, the kind of afternoon that makes you believe fall was invented just for moments like this soft gold light coming through the oak trees, white chairs arranged on the lawn, the smell of cut grass, and the caterer's rosemary chicken drifting from the tent. My wife had spent 3 weeks helping plan this wedding. She had folded 100 napkins herself. She had cried during the ceremony, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief I gave her, squeezing my arm. And now, not 40 minutes later, I found her behind the garden shed with my best friend's hands on her face and her forehead pressed against his. I had walked that direction because I was looking for a quiet place to make a phone call. The noise from the reception tent had been drifting toward me all evening, and I wanted to check in on my brother, who had been in the hospital that week and couldn't attend. That was the only reason I went that way. That was the only reason I saw them. They didn't see me. I took one step back behind the boxwood hedge. My heart didn't race. It didn't shatter. It did something I hadn't expected. It simply stopped asking questions. As if some part of me, some older and more honest part, had always known this was possible and had simply been waiting for the confirmation. I stood there for perhaps 30 seconds, long enough to be certain of what I was seeing, long enough to understand it wasn't a misunderstanding, wasn't a drunken stumble, wasn't anything I could reclassify with a more charitable explanation. My wife's hands were on his chest. His thumb was moving along her cheekbone. They were talking low, the way two people talk when they've said these things to each other before. I turned and walked back toward the reception tent. My best friend and I had known each other for 38 years. We had met at a job site in our mid-20s, two young men with calloused hands and big ideas about building things that would last. We had gone into business together briefly in our 30s, parted ways professionally but never personally. He had been in the room when my first son was born. I had sat with him in the hospital when his mother passed. We fished together every spring. I knew the sound of his laugh the way I knew the sound of my own heartbeat, or I thought I did. My wife and I had been married for 31 years. We had raised 2 sons in a house we built together, piece by piece, decision by decision. She was the person I called when anything happened, good or bad. She was the one who noticed when I was getting sick before I noticed it myself. Or she had been. Somewhere in the past 31 years, I had apparently missed a great deal. I picked up a glass of sparkling water from the bar and found a seat at the far end of the reception tent. My nephew and his new bride were dancing. The band was playing something slow and sweet. People were laughing. An elderly couple near me was holding hands. I watched all of this and felt as though I were watching it through glass, from a great distance, from some remove I hadn't chosen. My best friend's wife found me about 10 minutes later. She sat down in the empty chair beside me and didn't say anything for a moment. She was a small woman, sharp-eyed and careful, the kind of person who watches a room from the edges and knows everything happening in it. We had always gotten along well, she and I. She made my best friend a better man, I had always thought. Or I had thought that, once. She set her clutch purse on the table and said quietly, "How long have you known?" I looked at her. "About 10 minutes, I said. She nodded slowly. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look the way I expected a woman to look in this moment. "I've known for 4 months, she said. The band played on. Someone near the dance floor let out a long, happy laugh. "How?" I asked. She told me she had found a receipt, then a text she wasn't meant to find, then a pattern of absences that didn't line up with the explanations she'd been given. She had spent 4 months gathering the complete picture before she said a single word to anyone, including me. She had done this, she explained, not out of passivity, but out of precision. She had wanted to know everything before she decided anything. I understood that impulse completely. It was exactly what I would have done. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight," she said. "I didn't want to ruin your nephew's wedding." "Neither do I said. We looked at each other. There was a strange kind of clarity between us. The clarity of two people who have just discovered they are standing on the same burning ground. "Then we wait," she said. "We wait," I agreed. We shook hands, which was not something we had ever done before, and she went back to her table, and I went and danced with my nephew's new bride when the song changed to something upbeat, and I smiled and said all the right things, and nobody at that wedding had any idea that the world had just reorganized itself entirely. My best friend came back into the tent about 15 minutes after my wife did. He was flushed and laughing a little too easily, the way a man laughs when he's relieved no one noticed something. He clapped me on the back and said something about the band being great tonight. I agreed that the band was great. I got him a drink. We stood side by side and watched my nephew slow dance with his wife, and I smiled the entire time, and I didn't feel anything except a very focused, very specific kind of patience. On the drive home that night, my wife fell asleep in the passenger seat before we reached the highway. I drove in silence and thought about 31 years. I thought about the house we built. I thought about our sons. I thought about the particular way she had cried during the ceremony earlier that day, and I wondered how long she had been capable of being two different people and how I had not seen it. When we got home, she went straight upstairs. I sat in the kitchen for a long time with the lights off. I am 63 years old. I spent most of my adult life building things: houses, structures, a business, a marriage, a family. I had always believed that what you built with care would hold. I was not naive. I had seen enough of the world to know that things fall down sometimes. But I had believed, with a faith I had never quite examined, that what my wife and I had built together was sound. I had been wrong about that. The question was not how I felt about being wrong. I knew how I felt. The question was what I was going to do about it. I did not confront my wife that night, not the next morning, not the following week. I want to explain why, because I know how that sounds. I know there is a version of events in which silence looks like weakness, in which walking back into that tent and dancing and smiling and driving home looks like a man who couldn't face what he had seen. That is not what it was. I have spent my entire career reading structures. I know which walls are load-bearing and which ones you can remove. I know that if you want to take something down safely, you plan it carefully. You don't swing a sledgehammer at the first thing you see. You figure out what's holding what up, and you work methodically, and when you're done, the whole thing comes down at once, and nothing falls on anyone who doesn't deserve to be underneath it. I called a lawyer the Monday after the wedding. Not a family friend, not someone my wife knew, a firm in the next county, a woman who came recommended by my accountant. I told her what I had seen and what I suspected and what I wanted to know. She told me to document everything and not to change anything about my daily behavior. I asked her what everything meant. She told me. I spent the next 3 weeks being a very attentive husband. I noticed things I had been too comfortable to notice before. Patterns in her phone use, timing of certain errands that didn't quite line up, small withdrawals from our joint account that individually were meaningless but collectively told a story. I wrote everything down in a small notebook I kept in my truck. I was not angry, I was thorough. My best friend's wife and I had exchanged numbers at the wedding, a thing we had never done before despite knowing each other for nearly 4 decades. We texted occasionally, brief and careful. She was doing her own documentation. Between the two of us, we were building something complete. I want to be honest about something. During those 3 weeks, there were moments when the grief broke through the focus. I would be in the middle of something ordinary, eating breakfast, watching the evening news, falling asleep, and the image would come back. The way she leaned into him, the way his thumb moved along her face, the particular softness of it, which was the worst part, because it didn't look like recklessness or mistake. It looked like tenderness. It looked like something they had been building together for a long time. I allowed myself to feel that. I didn't push it away, but I did not let it change the plan. The occasion we chose was my wife's own birthday dinner. She had organized it herself, a reservation at the restaurant where we'd had our first date 33 years ago. Both our sons were flying in. My best friend and his wife were invited, of course. It was meant to be a warm evening, a celebration, the kind of dinner that makes everyone feel safe and loved. I called my sons 2 days before. I told them I needed to tell them something before the dinner, and I told them what I had seen and what I had confirmed in the weeks since. My older son went silent for a very long time. My younger son said words I won't repeat. I asked them both to trust me to handle it my way. They agreed, though not without some difficulty. My best friend's wife and I had one final conversation the night before. She had retained her own attorney. Her documentation was complete. She had already arranged for somewhere to stay after the dinner. She was calm in a way that took my breath away a little, not cold, not vindictive, but resolved. She had made her peace with the grief and arrived somewhere on the other side of it. "Are you ready?" she asked. "I have been ready," I said, "for 3 weeks." The dinner was set for 7 o'clock. My sons arrived at the restaurant before their mother, which I had asked them to do. I shook their hands and held them for a moment. My older son looked like he hadn't slept. My younger son looked like he wanted to break something. I told them again, trust me. My wife arrived in the dress she had bought specifically for this occasion, a dark blue dress she had shown me 2 weeks earlier, asking if I thought it was too formal. I had told her it was perfect. She looked beautiful. She kissed me on the cheek and said she was so glad we were all together. My best friend and his wife arrived 10 minutes later. He was in a gray blazer I had helped him pick out 3 Christmases ago at the outlet mall outside of town. His wife was wearing something simple and dark. She sat down across from me. Our eyes met for a moment. The first hour of dinner was almost unbearable in its normality. We ordered wine. We talked about my nephew's honeymoon. My best friend made a joke about getting old that everyone laughed at, including me. My wife told a story about our younger son when he was 7 years old that she has told at least 40 times and that everyone still laughs at anyway. It was a very good dinner. Then my wife excused herself to the restroom, and my best friend reached across the table to refill his wife's water glass, and his wife looked at him with an expression so precise and so deliberate that he slowly set the water pitcher down, and something shifted in his face. When my wife came back to the table, I was standing. I had not planned to stand, but I was on my feet, and the table had gone very quiet, and my 2 sons were looking at their mother with expressions that told her immediately that the evening had changed. I told her what I had seen at the wedding. I said it quietly. I said it completely. I did not raise my voice, and I did not use language I would regret. I told her where I had been standing and what I had observed and how long it had lasted and that I had not been mistaken about any of it. She didn't deny it. That was the thing I had not entirely expected, even after all the preparation. She sat down in her chair and she put her hands on the table and she looked at them and she did not deny a single word of it. My best friend started to say something. His wife cut him off with 2 quiet words. He stopped. I told my wife that I had been to see a lawyer. I told her what would happen next, in the most practical terms, that nothing had been decided yet, that we had choices to make, that I was not interested in a public scene, but I was also not interested in pretending. I told her our sons were aware of the situation and that they had been told out of respect for them, not as a weapon. My older son reached across the table and took his brother's hand. My younger son was crying. My older son was not. My wife saw this and something broke open in her face. Not remorse for the act itself, perhaps, but remorse for what it had done to her sons. And I believed that at least was real. My best friend tried again to say something. I looked at him across the table and I told him that I had nothing to say to him tonight, and I meant no disrespect to our 38 years, but that tonight was not the right time, and I was asking him to respect that. He nodded. He was pale. He looked in that moment about 20 years older than the man who had walked into the restaurant 45 minutes earlier. His wife stood up. She placed her napkin on the table and picked up her purse and said to the table generally that she hoped everyone would have a pleasant evening and that she would be in touch with appropriate parties through appropriate channels. Then she leaned down and said something very quietly into her husband's ear. He closed his eyes. She walked out of the restaurant. The 5 of us who remained sat in silence for a moment. The ambient noise of the restaurant silverware, conversation, someone's distant birthday being sung, continued around us, indifferent. My wife asked if we could go somewhere private to talk. I told her we could talk at home. We left the restaurant. My sons followed their mother in one car, and I drove alone. And somewhere on the highway, I felt the great exhaustion of the past 3 weeks finally arrive, settling over me like weather. I was 63 years old, and I had just done the hardest thing I had ever done, and I had done it in a room full of people I loved. And there was no version of this story in which everyone came out whole. The conversation at home lasted 3 hours. I will not recount all of it. Some of it belongs to my wife and to me and to no one else, not even in the telling of it. But I will say this, she told me the truth. All of it, as far as I could judge, including the parts that were hardest to hear. She told me when it had started and how it had started, and that she had not intended it to become what it became, and that she knew that didn't matter. She told me she was sorry, and she said it in a way that I believe she meant it. Though I also believe that sorry and resolved are not the same thing, and that what she was most sorry about was being seen. I asked her one question that had been living in me since that Saturday in September. I asked her if she had ever planned to tell me. She didn't answer for a long time, and then she said no. I slept in the guest room. My sons slept in their old rooms. In the morning, I made coffee for everyone, and we sat at the kitchen table together. The 4 of us, the way we had sat 10,000 mornings before this one. Except that everything was different and we all knew it. My younger son, who is 31 and has always been the more combustible of the two, said very little that morning. He drank his coffee and looked out the window and occasionally looked at his mother with an expression I recognized, not hatred, but a kind of grief that doesn't have a name yet. The grief of finding out that someone you thought you understood is someone else entirely. My older son, who is 34 and is very much like me in ways that sometimes frighten me, talked practically about what would happen next. He was trying to be useful. That is what he does with pain. My wife sat across from me and she looked diminished, and I will not pretend I felt nothing about that. 31 years is not nothing. I loved her for 31 years, genuinely and without reservation, and that love does not simply invert itself into something else because of what I now knew. It doesn't work that way, no matter what anyone tells you. It goes somewhere else. It becomes something more complicated and more quiet, but it doesn't disappear. I saw my best friend one more time after that evening, about 6 weeks later. We met at the diner where we had eaten breakfast together hundreds of times over the years, the one on the county road where the same woman has worked the counter since 1987. I got there first. He came in and sat across from me, and we ordered coffee, and we were quiet for a while. He apologized. I let him say all of it. He was thorough and he was genuine, and there was nothing in what he said that I could find fault with, which did not make it better but which I appreciated. I told him that I accepted his apology in the sense that I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life carrying hatred for a man I had loved like a brother. I told him that I didn't know what it would look like on the other side of all of this, what shape our acquaintance might take years from now, whether we would fish again or have coffee again, or simply nod at each other across a parking lot when we happened to cross paths. I told him I didn't need to decide that today. He nodded. He looked relieved, which was not quite the same as absolved, but I think it was something. His wife filed for divorce 2 months after the birthday dinner. She was efficient and unequivocal about it. From what I understood, she had already been planning the specifics for most of those 4 months she had spent in silence, long before she and I ever spoke. She was an extraordinary woman. I said so to my attorney, and my attorney, who had met her briefly, agreed. My wife and I spent 3 months in the complicated territory between what had happened and what would happen next. We saw a counselor twice a week. I went because I believed in being thorough about everything, including damage assessment. Some of what we worked through in those sessions was older than the affair, older than I had realized. There were things my wife needed that she had stopped asking me for, and things I had stopped offering without noticing. I am not saying this as an excuse for what she did. It is not an excuse. But I am 63 years old and I am not interested in easy narratives. And the easy narrative here would be that she was simply a bad person who did a bad thing. She was a complicated person who did a damaging thing, and the difference matters, even if only to me. We did not stay married. I want to be clear about that. We tried, in the way that people try when they are both exhausted and honest enough to know that trying may not be enough. In the end, the counselor said something in our final session that I have thought about many times since. She said that some things can be repaired, and some things can be replaced, and some things simply have to be acknowledged as being different now. Not worse necessarily, just irrevocably different. My wife and I are different now. We are no longer married. We are the parents of 2 sons who love us both and who have had to build their own relationship with the information they now carry about their family. We are, I hope, in some category that doesn't have a clean name, not friends, not enemies, not strangers, but 2 people who shared 31 years and still carry the weight of that in ways that are sometimes painful and sometimes unexpectedly tender. I sold the business 3 years ago. I live in a smaller house now, a house I bought for myself, a thing I had not done since I was a young man with calloused hands and ideas about what I was going to build. I fish in the spring. I see my sons at Thanksgiving and Christmas and various occasions in between. I have a dog, which I had always wanted and which my wife had always been ambivalent about. And the dog sleeps at the end of my bed and requires very little explanation for anything. I am not going to tell you that I am happy, exactly. That would be too clean a word for where I am. But I am present. I am awake. I know exactly what kind of ground I am standing on, which is something I did not always know during the years I thought I did. There is a thing that happens when you are standing in the middle of a garden at a wedding, looking at the 2 people you trusted most in the world, and the world reorganizes itself. You can feel the weight of everything, the 31 years, the 2 sons, the fishing trips, the house you built board by board, The hospital rooms and the holidays and the thousand ordinary mornings. You feel all of it at once, and it is enormous, and for a moment you cannot move. And then you take one step back, and then another. And you walk back toward the music, and you pick up a glass of water, and you sit down, and you wait. Not because you are weak, not because you don't know what you saw, but because you understand, after 63 years of building things, that the most important work is not done in the moment of discovery. It is done in everything that comes after. In the decisions you make when the shock has passed and the grief has settled, and all that remains is the question of who you are going to be now. I am still answering that question. I think I will be answering it for the rest of my life. I don't consider that a tragedy. I consider it the work.